You learned to stay quiet before you learned to feel safe. You became responsible long before you understood what responsibility truly meant. You stopped asking for help because no one came the first time. You grew up fast, but something inside you never caught up. And now, that quiet part still waits, watching everything. There is a certain type of person who appears strong, composed, and unusually mature for their age, yet carries an invisible tension that never fully leaves their body or mind. This video explores the psychology of people who grew up too fast, revealing how early responsibility, emotional neglect, or instability shaped their behaviors, relationships, and inner world in ways most people never notice. Many believe growing up early creates stronger, more capable individuals who are naturally ahead of others, emotionally disciplined, and better equipped to handle life's challenges without breaking under pressure. But that assumption misses something critical, because what looks like strength on the outside is often a survival pattern formed under pressure, not a freely developed personality built in safety. Imagine a child sitting quietly in a noisy room, listening carefully to adult conversations, learning tone shifts, memorizing moods, and adjusting behavior to avoid conflict long before understanding what any of it truly means. Picture another child who learns to cook, clean, and manage responsibilities not as a choice, but as a necessity, stepping into roles that were never meant for them at that stage of life. There is also the child who comforts others, who becomes the emotional anchor in the household, absorbing tension, suppressing their own needs and becoming the strong one without ever being asked. These moments seem small on the surface, but repeated over time, they shape a nervous system that prioritizes control, awareness, and emotional restraint over curiosity, play, and spontaneous expression. Psychologically, this pattern is often linked to early conditioning, where the brain adapts to unpredictable environments by developing hyper-awareness, emotional suppression, and a constant readiness to respond to potential stress. This adaptation is not weakness, but a form of intelligence, where the mind learns to predict outcomes, read subtle cues, and manage situations before they escalate into something overwhelming or unsafe. Over time, this creates individuals who are highly perceptive, able to read rooms instantly, understand unspoken dynamics, and anticipate problems before they even fully emerge in a situation. What others call intuition is often a deeply trained survival skill, built through repeated exposure to emotional unpredictability, where paying attention was not optional, but necessary for stability and safety. As a result, these individuals develop strong problem-solving abilities, independence, and an internal sense of responsibility that does not rely on external validation or constant guidance from others. They become the ones who figure things out alone, who take initiative without being told, and who rarely depend on others because experience taught them that dependence often leads to disappointment. This independence can look like confidence, but it is often rooted in a deeper belief that relying on others is risky, unpredictable, or simply not worth the emotional cost involved. Daily routines become structured, not out of preference, but as a way to maintain control over an environment that once felt chaotic, unstable, or beyond their influence as a child. They learn to manage time, responsibilities, and expectations early, creating systems that allow them to function efficiently, even when internal emotional needs remain unaddressed or pushed aside. This creates a person who appears highly capable, someone others rely on, but who rarely feels comfortable being vulnerable or asking for support when they truly need it. Another subtle effect is their tolerance for discomfort, where boredom, silence, or even emotional emptiness feels familiar rather than threatening, because they learn to exist within those states early in life. While others seek constant stimulation or distraction, these individuals can sit with stillness, not always because they enjoy it, but because they were conditioned to endure it without complaint. Creativity often develops in this space, where imagination becomes a refuge, a private world where emotions can exist freely without judgment, pressure, or the need to perform for anyone else. However, this same tolerance can also lead to emotional neglect of the self, where they ignore their own needs simply because they are used to doing so, not because those needs do not exist. In contrast to a world driven by instant gratification, they often develop patience, not as a virtue taught intentionally, but as a necessity shaped by waiting, adapting, and managing situations beyond their control. They understand that not everything comes immediately, and this perspective allows them to persist through challenges that would frustrate or overwhelm someone who has always experienced quick results. But beneath all of this capability lies a quieter truth, one that is rarely spoken about, where the inner child remains alert, cautious, and still searching for a sense of safety that was never fully established. That inner part does not disappear with age, success, or independence, but instead adapts, becoming quieter, more hidden, yet still influencing decisions, reactions, and emotional responses in subtle ways. This is why moments of stress, rejection, or uncertainty can feel disproportionately intense, because they activate patterns that were formed long before logic and reasoning had the chance to develop. Understanding this is not about labeling weakness, but about recognizing that what appears as strength is often layered, complex, and shaped by experiences that required adaptation rather than choice. And once you begin to see this pattern clearly, you start to understand not just behavior, but the deeper story behind it, a story that continues to unfold in ways most people never pause to question. Risk-taking for these individuals often looks different, not reckless or impulsive, but calculated, measured, and shaped by an early understanding that mistakes can carry heavier consequences than others might expect. They learn through experience that actions have weight, so every decision is filtered through layers of awareness, anticipating outcomes, minimizing damage, and avoiding unnecessary exposure to situations that feel uncertain or unstable. Yet there are moments where they test boundaries, not out of rebellion, but from a quiet desire to feel something unstructured, something unscripted, a brief escape from the constant need to stay in control. These moments of experimentation can feel both freeing and unsettling, because stepping outside of control challenges the very system that once protected them from chaos and emotional unpredictability. When consequences arise, they rarely externalize blame, instead turning inward, analyzing their choices, learning quickly, and adjusting behavior without needing external correction or prolonged guidance from others. This creates a pattern of learning through experience, where growth is not theoretical but lived, shaped by action, reflection, and an ongoing process of refining how they move through the world. Solitude becomes a familiar space, not necessarily chosen at first, but gradually embraced, as a place where expectations fade and the pressure to perform or manage others disappears completely. In that solitude, they begin to hear themselves more clearly. Thoughts that were once buried under responsibility slowly rise, forming a deeper understanding of their own emotions and internal conflicts. They often develop a strong inner dialogue, analyzing situations, replaying interactions, and seeking meaning beneath surface-level events, building a sense of clarity that others may struggle to access. This introspection can lead to creativity, insight, and self-awareness, but it can also create overthinking, where the mind loops through possibilities, trying to prevent future discomfort by predicting every possible outcome. Emotionally, they tend to regulate themselves internally, rarely expressing immediate reactions, choosing instead to process feelings quietly before deciding how, or if, those emotions should be shared outwardly. This delayed response can appear as calmness or emotional stability, but it is often a learned behavior, where expressing emotions too quickly once felt unsafe or led to unwanted consequences. They become skilled at managing anger, sadness, or anxiety in private, maintaining composure in public, which allows them to navigate complex situations without escalating tension unnecessarily. However, this self-regulation can create distance in relationships, where others may struggle to understand what they are truly feeling, leading to misunderstandings or assumptions about emotional detachment. Patience becomes another defining trait, shaped by years of waiting, adapting, and understanding that immediate results are not always possible, especially in environments where control was limited or inconsistent. They often pursue long-term outcomes, focusing on stability, growth, and gradual progress rather than quick wins, because their mindset is wired for endurance rather than instant reward. This perspective gives them an advantage in areas requiring consistency and discipline, where others may give up early, but it can also lead to postponing their own happiness, always waiting for the right time. Failure, when it happens, is rarely seen as a final judgment, but rather as information, something to be studied, understood, and used as a tool for improvement rather than a reflection of identity. Because they face challenges early, setbacks do not feel entirely foreign, instead becoming part of a familiar cycle of adapting, adjusting, and continuing forward without losing direction completely. They may not celebrate success loudly, but they rarely collapse under failure, maintaining a steady internal balance that allows them to keep moving even when outcomes are uncertain or delayed. Socially, they develop a keen awareness of human behavior, noticing subtle shifts in tone, body language, and energy, often understanding what others feel before it is explicitly expressed. This awareness helps them navigate conversations carefully, avoiding unnecessary conflict, adjusting communication styles, and maintaining harmony even in emotionally charged situations. They can sense tension early, often stepping into roles that diffuse conflict, mediate disagreements, or stabilize group dynamics without drawing attention to themselves directly. However, this sensitivity can also become overwhelming, where they absorb too much from others, carrying emotional weight that does not belong to them, simply because they are used to being aware. In modern environments driven by speed, noise, and constant stimulation, these traits stand out, not always visibly, but in the way they approach problems, relationships, and long-term decisions. They bring depth into spaces that often prioritize surface-level interaction, offering perspective, patience, and emotional intelligence in situations where quick reactions dominate most responses. Yet the same patterns that create strength can also limit them, especially when they struggle to receive support, express vulnerability, or allow themselves to experience ease without feeling undeserving. The world often rewards their discipline and independence, but rarely recognizes the internal cost that came with developing those traits at such an early stage of life. Understanding this creates a shift, not in how they function externally, but in how they relate to themselves, recognizing that survival patterns do not have to define every part of their identity. It opens the possibility of integrating strength with softness, allowing responsibility to coexist with rest, and giving space for the inner child to experience something it missed, safety without conditions. Because true growth for them is not about becoming stronger, they already are, but about learning that they no longer have to carry everything alone, even if that is all they have ever known.